An emotional reaction is just like a car alarm. Someone touched a wound, a belief system, or an actual wound, and you're reacting. Instead of judging yourself for having the reaction, where did that reaction come from?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Blah, Blah, Blah Something Wellness podcast. I am so excited for our special guest today. This is not a law enforcement person, but this is somebody that absolutely has impacted both Chris and myself for the better. We are joined by the one and only Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. Hi, thank you so much for being here. Um, I'm not even gonna. If anybody wants to know who Chris and I are, you can go to our website. I'm the host of the Blah 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 Something Wellness podcast. Chris is my partner in all things, and you might recognize the name Don Miguel Ruiz and Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. and Don Jose Ruiz. They wrote some books. This is only a fraction of them. The most recognized, I think, is the Four Agreements. There's also the Fifth Agreement. There's the Mastery of Love, the Mastery of Self. There is a long list of these books. And actually, when Chris and I very first started dating, it was my birthday, and he actually gifted me the Mastery of Self. So that's how we started our relationship. So
Thank
awesome.
you.
We're very excited to have you. So thank you. On that note, will you tell the audience who you are?
Sure. Well, first things, Tami, Chris, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's an honor. My name is Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. I am an author of The Five Levels of Attachment, Mastery of Self, The Poisoned Arrow, my latest book. I am the eldest son of Don Miguel Ruiz, who is the author of The Four Agreements, and I am a descendant of the Eagle Knight lineage in my family's tradition. Uh, my grandmother taught spirituality. My father taught spirituality. My brothers teach the spirituality, or you can say the Toltec tradition of our family. So, from that point of view, that's who I am uh, in the professional world. But as an individual, I'm a father and a husband, and I take care of my kids. I help my wife, and that's my main job. Everything else is just moonlighting.
And you're a musician.
And I'm a musician too. Yes. Yeah.
I am too, and I follow you on Instagram, and I see you're doing your thing. I love it.
Yeah, I decided to become a professional musician at the age of 50. I'm like, you know what? Uh, I'm young and I'm going to enjoy the rest of my life. So I'm going to do something I always wanted to. I got my career, I fulfilled that promise. Now I'm going to satisfy my soul and do what I've always loved to do and really put my discipline into it.
I love that, and that right there, our audience could take some lessons from. Because our audience is primarily law enforcement and first responders. It's a very purpose-driven but exhausting career, one of the hardest careers. And a lot of time, one of the things that we teach is, don't lose who you are. Don't lose your identity. Your identity is not a first responder. You need to have other hobbies and passions and interests. And so I love that you are also doing that. You've fulfilled one purpose and you're on to that next chapter. I'm a musician. One of these days we can jam.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Awesome. Well, I want to kind of start for our audience. I think some of our audience knows and is familiar with you guys and what you do. I was actually talking to one of our team members, and she worked corrections, and they actually passed out the Four Agreements to everybody in their department at one point. So I thought that was phenomenal. I think it should be mandatory reading for everybody in law enforcement. So I know that that is your dad's book, but can we start with the Four Agreements to kind of set the baseline for the conversation and then build on that through all the other books and everything else that you teach?
Sure. Well, the Four Agreements was released in 1997 by my father, Don Miguel Ruiz, and they are be impeccable with the word, don't make assumptions, always do your best, and what's the other one? Oh yeah, don't take things personal. So for me, these are the four agreements, and there's a fifth one: be skeptical but learn to listen. The main problem that the four agreements addresses, as well as the fifth agreement in every one of our books in different facets, is something called domestication. Domestication is a system of reward and punishment by which we model the behavior of an individual, where if you live up to an expectation, you get a reward. And since we are emotional beings who experience the full spectrum of our emotions, that reward feels like acceptance, which feels like love. And the punishment for not living up to expectation is judgment, or that form of castigation. And it feels like there a lack of love, because love is withheld because we didn't live up to expectations. So this is the way we learn conditional love. I love you if you live up to this expectation. I love you if you live up to the image I project of you or that I project of myself. So that's the main problem that the four agreements addresses. You can call it conditioning or domestication or indoctrination, whatever it is, or that word that resonates with you. But it's basically the way that we use conditional love as the motivator to create something. Unfortunately, because of that, we begin to lose a sense of who we are because we're always trying to chase that carrot, that elusive carrot that as soon as I get it, I'm worthy of love, I'm worthy of acceptance. But we get so attached to a motivator that one of the worst things that can ever happen to us is actually catching that carrot, because who we are we without it? Because the ability to even accept ourselves is something that, who do you think you are? Whatever judgment there is about that. So it becomes this thing that it works for a lot of people. There's a lot of people out there with degrees and diplomas that they didn't want, but they got it because they want to live up to certain expectations, be it from family, be it society, be it whatever expectation it is, or the professions that they're living. Yes, they're successful, but they're miserable. Basically, they're living someone else's life, and they agreed with it. So that's one facet. The other facet would be simply is that you're constantly forsaking yourself, pretending to be something you're not for the sake of someone else's point of view or prejudice or whatever it is. So the four agreements, this is where it comes in. It's these are instruments that allows us to clean the channels of communication within ourselves, not just with other people, but within ourselves. To be impeccable with the word, every word is an empty symbol whose definition is subject to agreement. There are words that are innocent, but are not so innocent to someone else. You know, like if you say a certain word here in America, United States, but if you say that same word in the United Kingdom, that's not so innocent. You know, it's these are it happens with Spanish, it happens with English. There's words that I'm trying to think of one that would be appropriate, but
I have one that's inappropriate that I'm
don't do it. Don't.
thank God. It's not that I'll use it. I don't know what it is in Spanish because Chris doesn't know, but okay, I'll what I shouldn't use it. I'm gonna use it. Boto. Boto. Boto is a pink dolphin, but in Hawaiian, it's your boy Bits. So
All right, since we opened that door, the image I have is the word fanny pack. The word fanny pack, it's a pouch, a bag that you put over your fanny, which is a cute way of saying someone's behind or butt or gluteus maximus, right? In the United Kingdom, it doesn't mean that. It means it's a woman's private area, and it's a way that it's kind of uh, it's kind of like the way like what's the name like what's the nickname you give someone named Richard?
mhm.
There you go.
Welcome to our podcast, everybody.
Yeah. So basically, to be impeccable with the word is understanding that the words that you think are universal are not universal. They have different meaning, different definitions, and you might seem innocent within you, but you might say it someone else, and they have a totally different definition. One of the biggest mistakes is thinking that everyone thinks exactly the same way as we do. Yeah. But they don't. In this case, in the United Kingdom, they speak English, and the words are spelled the same way, pronounced the same way, enunciated the same way. Both words are English, but one has an innocent term here in the States and not so innocent in the United Kingdom. You know, kind of when you say Randy in the United Kingdom, means something totally different here in the United States. You know, And if you're wondering what that means, well, there's a reason why Austin Powers kept saying it in the movie. But to be impeccable with the word, if we know that the word is an empty symbol with definition subject to agreement, that some words don't just have an intellectual definition, but they also have an emotional charge. Because you never know when you're going to insult someone with something you think is innocent, but they'll hear it and misconstrue it and distort it to their own point of view and correct from their point of view, because that's how they grew up. That's how the environment where they come from, the culture, the society, the community have given that word a totally different meaning and definition, and you can get in so much trouble with that. I know a friend who works at a news agency in Latin America, and he has a list this long of words he can't say in Spanish because they're innocent in Mexico, but not innocent in Latin America, and vice versa. Innocent in Latin America, but not innocent in Mexico and the United States. It just has those meanings. So be impeccable with your intent. I know this is a little woo woo, but it falls in the same. The intent is the energy that animates your body and mind. It's the thing that gives power. It's the same energy you use to move your arms, to move your legs. It's exactly the same energy we use to create a thought, to give a word a meaning. To be impeccable with the word, or you can say be impeccable with intent, is know that the words you use have power, have meaning, and how you use it impacts how you live life. I explained this to my father and says, that's exactly what I meant to say. But since you changed the agreement, let me change the agreement one more time. Be impeccable with yourself. For example, if you look in yourself in the mirror and you define that in order to be worthy of love, you have to weigh this much, have certain looks, like, for example, to look the way I did when I was 27 years old, to have hair like my brother Jose, and to weigh 170 pounds. I look at myself in the mirror, that's just not the case. I weigh 179. I am 50 years old, and I look at, and this is the truth of my hair. Because I don't live up to that expectation, I'm going to castigate myself. You fat, you bald fat, you old bald fat. Have you ever felt the sting of judgment when you look at yourself in the mirror? Well, that sting is domestication. When you look at yourself in the mirror and you judge who you see, and you're judging it because you have a belief of how it's supposed to be, and because you don't live up to expectation, you're castigating yourself, you're rejecting yourself. But here's the thing: you're using your word not impeccably, because you're using your word to reinforce a judgment, to reinforce a condition about who you're supposed to be. And the thing about it is that that person doesn't exist, quite possibly never existed, and probably never going to exist because it never really reflected the reality of who you are, but it reflected a belief of what is supposed to be perfect, something that is completely free of any flaw. For example, the truth exists whether you believe in it or not. The truth doesn't need you for it to exist. It exists with or without you. Kind of like a black hole was going to exist whether we prove its existence or not. A black hole was going to exist regardless of whether or not humanity believed in black holes or not. It doesn't need us for it to exist. That's what the truth is. In contrast, a belief only exists for as long as we say yes to it. The moment we change that yes into a no, it ceases to exist, which means a belief doesn't exist somewhere out there in the world. A belief only exists in our consciousness, in our belief system, in our minds, both as an individual, as in a collective. It needs me for it to exist. And that's the difference between a belief and truth. So when you look at yourself in the mirror and you're judging yourself and you're forsaking yourself and castigating yourself for not living up to this image, understand that you're judging yourself based on a belief and not the truth. In fact, your belief system in this case is not letting you see who you really are. So don't, to be impeccable with the word is to realize how I'm using my word. Don't make assumptions. Don't take it personal. Well, the assumption, in this case, an example of the fanny pack, whatever, if I say the word fanny pack, uh, I make the assumption that you have the same belief system as I do. But And that's also true of someone, and the way I know is because I said it in front of someone from Wales, and she could have made the assumption for the rest of the weekend, thinking that I said it the same way they say it in the United Kingdom, and be really upset at me. Like, this guy, how can he call himself? Does his grandmother know he's disrespecting women this way? But luckily for me, she gave me the benefit of the doubt and she asked me, Miguel, what does that word mean to you? And I explained to her, oh, it's just a little bag about she goes over your fanning, which is means gluteus maximus or your butt. And she goes, well, I understand what you mean now. Thank you for letting me know. But you have to understand the United Kingdom, that's not your fanny. Your fanny is it's the C word here in the States, in other words. She could have made the assumption the rest of the time thinking that I meant the same thing that she grew up thinking, which luckily for me, she gave me the benefit of that and asked me. She didn't make an assumption. She would have made an assumption had she not asked me and be mad at me for something she thought I said. Even though I did say the word, it didn't have the same definition. It didn't have the same meaning, even though we're both speaking English. And her English is from the United Kingdom, and my English is from California, the United States. So from that point of view, don't take it personal. Is to me is to not assume responsibility for someone else's will of perception. I'm responsible to the tips of my fingers. I'm responsible for the way I see life and the way I live my life. So in this case, had she been upset at me, taking things personal would have meant, oh, she's using my words against me and judging me and all that kind of thing, whatever it is. But in reality, it's just a misunderstanding. Now that we have the understanding of what that word is, I'm not going to censor myself, but at the same time, I am going to be courteous and respectful and probably find a different way to communicate in order for us to understand. Because one of the things that we want to be as human beings is be able to understand each other, to create a bridge that allows us to understand. And that requires not just the willingness to speak, but the willingness to listen. And by listening, it also means understanding. And when you say a word, like in the case of fanny pack, when you're about to have an emotional reaction because you got insulted, she gave me the benefit of the doubt and asked me, Miguel, what does that mean to you? Since she gave me the benefit of the doubt, she found out my world point of view is mine, her point of view is mine, and somewhere along we understood each other. We both laughed about it, but we found both found ways of figuring out. And I've been telling the story for several times. I've found like I told this story once, and this young lady told me that's exactly how it happened with when I found out. She told me the story of her and her fiance, now husband. Her fiance was from Scotland, and she's from the States. And she went to Scotland and to meet the family before the wedding, and they threw a big party with a good bonfire. And it's a chilly night in Scotland. And as the night progressed, and she saw it was getting cold, and there's a fire pit over there. She decided to stand up and announce to everyone, well, I'm going to go over there and warm up my fanny by the fire. And the whole place started laughing hysterically because it meant something dramatically different to them than how she meant it. Mm. When we have that understanding, we can see how our misunderstandings can lead to a lot of chaos and frustration and a lot of anger and a lot of fight back and forth. But the four agreements, going full circle, these are instruments that allows us to clean the channels of communication, not just within us as individuals in relationships, but individuals within ourselves. My belief systems, my ideas, what words am I using that I've been totally misunderstanding? Like, for example, right now, my mother got a diagnosis of something, and instead of letting one word kind of dictate our understand of it, we decided to, okay, let's do some research. Oh, it means this. And doing the research, we found out that our assumption of what that word meant was something dramatically different than what the research actually showed us that it is. The ability isn't the truth. The fifth agreement: be skeptical but learn to listen. So to me, that's the essence of the four agreements in the long about way. But I wanted to explain it in a real world situation. And to me, these are instruments that allows us to heal the wounds that conditional love left in our hearts, but also to be able to say yes and no to things we want to say yes and no to create the life that we want to live. Because who's going to control the way I live my life? My beliefs that I grew up without ever questioning, or the ability in myself to make a decision despite my belief system because it is I who wants this. What do I want? Like, for example, right this moment, I'm the sum of every decision I've ever made, every choice, every consequence, every experience, every success, every failure, every heartbreak, every those traumatic moments, they all sum up to this moment in time with this breath. I am the sum of it all. It all leads up to this moment. But with the same breath and the same heartbeat, I'm the youngest I will ever be. Today is the youngest day of my life. I know this because if you take a picture of me right now and show it to me in a few years, I'm going to say, look at how young I was. I know that because I'm already doing that with pictures that I took before. So I have the whole life ahead of me. How do I want to live it? How do I want to engage it? If I let my belief system tell me what I'm supposed to do, then I'm constantly chasing the carrot. But if I accept myself and I start eating the carrot, meaning acceptance, then passion becomes the motivator of the life I want to live. Because how do I want to live the rest of my life? The only person who gets to answer that is me. So with me, it's like to respect myself, to make choices, and to respect myself to experience the consequences of my own choices. That's what makes me a Toltec, an artist. The canvas for my work of art is my life. And the instrument I'm going to use to create that work of art is going to be my body, my mind. So to me, that's what I've learned from the four agreements in that essence, in a nutshell. And yeah.
That I love. Thank you. And I've been thinking about it, leading up to this moment to have this call with you, how the four agreements correlate and with law enforcement and as a whole. And one of the things is that cops are good cops. There are people for the audience. Yes, there are people that have no business being in the profession. We know that. But most cops are actually very good people that they're doing it of service and purpose and have good hearts, good humans. They are impeccable with their word to the external. Honesty and integrity are huge facets of being good in law enforcement, but being impeccable with the word to themselves, that self-loathing, that negative self-talk, that is a problem within law enforcement culture. The taking everything personal is definitely a problem, especially within the walls of a PD. You don't get a promotion, you take it personal. You get reprimanded for something, you take it personal. Somebody files a complaint, you have an IA, take it personal. So that's something that we can definitely lean into teaching the law enforcement community that it's not personal. And I want to kind of talk on that. There's so much. I'm so excited. But the not personal for the audience, understanding when we say it's not personal, that's good or bad. And I always say this, like, Miguel, we just met you. I could be like, I think you're amazing. You're so awesome. I love that you're a musician. You wrote all these books. I actually referenced you guys in my master's thesis. Like, you're amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you feel good. I could also be like, you know what? Not really a fan. You kind of remind me of somebody else. I've met a lot of celebrities, blah.
Yeah.
Nothing about you changed. Don't know anything about you but my perception. And that's kind of how I teach your guys' teachings when I teach it forward, is it's through a lens. And so we get to pick and choose. With law enforcement, this is something I wanted to unpack with you. So the never make assumptions.
Mm.
Now, I teach that all the time. And when people listen, it's like, you're assuming. We all make assumptions. With law enforcement specific, they have to assume, and not only
Yeah.
do they have to assume the worst.
Mhm.
It's a matter of life and death and safety for themselves and community, so they have to assume the worst on the job.
Mhm.
What would you say, how would you guide law enforcement to kinda turn it off when they go home?
Cool. Well, here's the thing. I've actually taught this like one like I've been teaching about assumptions, and ironically, I actually used the images of a police officer, a firefighter, and a soldier. All right. First things first, I have to describe what an assumption is. Because in order to answer this question, we have to be on the same page, right? All right. So this is my way of explaining what an assumption is. I studied film and video production in art in college. So I'm a liberal arts major in the sense of I studied film and graphic design and art. That's what I did as an author. I dropped what I learned from that into writing books. And one of the instruments we used in art and graphic design and conceptual art is something called the Gestalt principle of closure, which is a psychiatric instrument, a psychological instrument. The Gestalt principle of closure says this: if you draw a circle and you don't close it, the mind has a capacity to project that missing part in order to close the circle. If you draw two sides of a triangle and don't draw that third line, the mind has the capacity to project that missing line because the mind, when it doesn't have all the information, it needs still know. So it has a tendency to project it what if or the image of what it's supposed to be. Now, in art, in order to create an active audience or an engaged audience, this is used all the time. It's actually art that allows us to interact with the viewer or participant or whoever. In literature, the genre that uses it the most is mysteries. Who done it? When? Where? Who? What? When? Where? And why? Miss Scarlet with a dagger in the ballroom. And the reason why the mind does this is because it needs to know. In order for me to make a choice, I need to have information. For example, if you're walking down a well illuminated path, a path that you know very well, that you go down every day, you will walk it briskly and sometimes not even pay attention. You could even walk around with a phone and still be able to make the right steps. But here's the thing, if you're walking down that same path and it's not well illuminated, it's a moonless night and there is no light. Even though you know this path, you're still going to walk slow because you don't have all the information. You don't know if you're going to step on some droppings, some animal droppings. You don't know if there's some crack or just simply whatever it is. But you slow down the pace because you don't have all the information. One of the things the mind needs to know is have information because the more information I have, the more confidence I feel to make a choice or to take an action or things like that. So an assumption is projecting that missing part of the line. An example, I'm not sure I have time, but I'll do my very best to do it quickly. Imagine me when I was young, I had an ex-girlfriend left me for someone else, and I had a big wound. This is a fictional story based on truth, by the way. And you have this heartbreak, a wound that you don't trust people. But you're young, I'm young, and we move in together. We go deeper in this relationship, but the wound is still there because I haven't taken care of it. I haven't been healing at all. One day, after years of developing that habit of calling each other a certain time at 7 o'clock on the dot, we call each other to make sure that we're okay because one of us is coming home. Do you need something? So one day, 7 o'clock rolls and she hasn't called. And the mind starts thinking, why hasn't she called? I have one line of information was at 7 p.m. we call each other. The other line of information is she hasn't called. The missing line is why hasn't she called? And the mind starts creating potential stories. She's still at work and she can't call me. She's at the gym. Her phone battery died. She's with her girlfriend. She's with another guy. She's with another guy. I knew it. I knew it. She's with someone else. That explains this. That explains that. The mind create a story that hit an emotional wound. And because there's an emotional reaction, the mind just started going crazy. By the time she walks into the door with Thai food in their hands. She goes, surprise! I've been so mad that I just look at her and not even look at the Thai food. I look at her like a Mexican soap opera. Argument ensues, an accusation flies, a fight happens, and we break up. And years later, I'm talking to a therapist. Every person I ever been in a relationship leaves me for someone else. And you tell the story, and the therapist stops you at, wait a minute. She had Thai food in her hands. She had Thai food. There was a sixth story. Had I been in a healthy situation, I could have told that sixth story. I could have told four more to make it 10. If I told that story as a potential, and she walked in through the door, 9 stories dissipate as one potential story becomes the truth. What if I told 10 stories and none of them was she's going to surprise me with my favorite meal? Then when she walked into the door, 10 stories dissipate as the truth becomes truth. Like as the truth is revealed itself, she want to surprise myself. How many wounds do we have because we believed an assumption? Because we created an assumption based on an old wound and react to it. The danger about believing our assumption is that we take action. And as soon as we believe it might have consequences that, well, it's not what we wanted. Like, for example, it's like when my younger brother was 6 years old or seven, and he's learning how to write, and he's learning how to write his name, and he's writing it. And then he comes in and tells my father, I want to go home because we're visiting people, we're visiting friends. I want to go home. I want to go home. They're making fun of me. Well, what happened? They put my name and made it feminine. Josefina, Josefina, Josefina. My brother's Josefina, Josefina. And my dad says, that's her name. Oh, so he realized she wasn't making fun of him. That's actually her name. She was actually mimicking. And the anger, the anger went away, and she went back. He went back to play with the kids. Imagine had he not told my father that he would have just sat with that frustration and anger. That as years got older, he just was afraid of anyone making fun of his name and making it feminine. And whenever that wound gets touched, he gets angry. Like the fanny pack story, like he found out. An assumption in this case is from a story or potential story that we project onto life, but it's not the truth because we're the ones who projected it. It takes discipline to use an assumption because the potential story could be there. A firefighter has to make the assumption that there's someone in that room that's on fire. A soldier has to make the assumption that there's a landmine on that road. A police officer has to make the assumption that there's a gun in the car they just pulled over. Staying in your discipline is reminding yourself, I'm projecting, but you still have to verify because the assumption is not the truth. If you don't have the discipline and you're going to believe it, mainly if you haven't been trained for it, then you're going to constantly be reacting. But those who have been trained, it's an instrument that allows you to survive. For example, a landmine, you have to go in there and clear the field. And if there wasn't, it's okay. Everyone lives. Because if they just like, there possibly isn't, then something happens. There you go. So in this case, in the scenario, like to not make assumptions, for me personally, it's easier if I change it just a little bit, if I skew it. Don't believe your assumptions. It's actually a lot easier to practice disagreement by making that little change, even though it kind of still means something similar. But when I change it to don't believe your assumptions, it just allows me to remind me that I'm the one projecting assumptions. Now, as a police officer, as a human being, the question was, how can you not bring it home? Well, in order for you not to bring it home, you have to keep reminding yourself that an assumption is still a projection. as human beings, we still have emotional wounds, be it in our personal life or in our individual, in our professional life. We have emotional wounds, and sometimes we're not aware we have those wounds, and those triggers still get triggered. So as you can say, it's about awareness. One of the things, for example, what I mean by that, I've had the luxury of speaking to firefighters, soldiers, police officers, cholos, and gangsters. I've spoken to prisoners, I've spoken to gang members, I've spoken to police officers and firefighters and soldiers. I have family who are all of that. And the one constant is none of them want to admit they have PTSD. Well, I can't say general, just there's something that's constant. On one side, they don't want to look weak. I don't want to be soft, or they want to lose that thing that keeps them from making choices, or the worst one, I don't want my team to lose trust in me. Well, however version you put it, it all comes down to the same. I don't want to acknowledge I have PTSD. So you have people from, say, a police officer with PTSD and a gang member with PTSD, the mere sight of each other going to set each other off, and you still have no idea how it happened. You're going to escalate, and you weren't aware. That could be true whether you're wearing the badge while you're on duty or when you're not wearing the badge when you're off duty. We're still human with that wound still there. That's going to be true on both sides. And that will be true for as long as that wound hasn't been healed. I did talk to one firefighter once who told me, I don't want to take care of it because at the same time, that's the thing that allows me to go into that fire. I don't want to lose that thing that makes me go into a situation that I could potentially get harmed, but I need that fight or flight to engage. And I didn't understand that until I recognized that I have PTSD with myself. My son has autism, and he went through a very rough phase during his teenage years. I had a concussion. I have bite marks or my body that happens with someone who's dysregulated in the autism world. Now he's not there. He was at a place that was helped him heal and find that regulation. He found a way to regulate. He's done a great job. He's much better. But one day, while he was in a facility that was helping him with him, I was walking around, and I'm at a place called Liberty Station here in San Diego, and we're telling our friends how we can't take our son there because it's right. Liberty Station is right underneath the flight path, and every time a plane flies over, my son escalates because it's too loud. As soon as we're finishing telling the story to our friends, we hear over that. It's the sound of a young man who's escalating, an autistic young man. And we go around, and there it is. There's that young man. And my body reacted, oh, they need my help. I gave the bag that I'm carrying and gave it to my wife. And my wife says, Miguel, what are you doing? You don't need to do anything. Like, they need my help. And I'm rushing because I see two adults trying to help this young man who is in the middle of an autistic meltdown. And I go over like, hey, my son has autism. If you need help, I know what to do. Just let me know. I'm like, oh, okay. No. It turns out that they're both therapists, that they take groups of autistic young men and women around to be social. So they're professionals. They even give me a card for my son. So I take a step back and I'm like, all right, but they may still need me because he could escalate at any given moment, and I need to be able to help. I go to the bathroom to wash my hands, have it be clean, and then I look at myself in the mirror, and I'm looking at myself and my reflection. I says, Miguel, that's not your son. Miguel, that's not your son. But my boy needs me. That's not your son. But he needs me. And it was one of those moments where I realized that I had PTSD. I had tears in my eyes in that moment of recognizing, acknowledging my truth that I have PTSD. I, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., have been diagnosed with caregivers fatigue, and I now recognize I definitely have PTSD. And it was an emotional. And when I left the bathroom, instead of going back to try to help out, I went to where my wife is, and I was still watching what was happening. Someone puts a bag of ice, puts it over the forehead of the young man, and I felt like it looked like relief. And this person just also calmed down long enough for someone to put headphones on his ears, and all of a sudden his smile came back. He stood up as if nothing happened. The sensory overload came to an end, and he's happy-go-lucky. And I'm seeing all the other young men and women waiting for him over there, and he walks by, and I learned so much. As he walks by, me and my wife look at each other and we begin to cry because we both acknowledge, like, we just lived through that. It's one of those things that my brother says in the Toltec tradition, there's nothing to learn but to unlearn. What should I unlearn? Anything that stops me from giving myself the permission to heal. That's what I've learned, because one thing I've learned in life is that we heal with our own permission. And sometimes we don't give ourselves permission to heal because I have to live up to an image. I have to live up to this, whatever it is, whatever standard or the image of perfection that we have, or whatever it is that we think that we've interpreted that way, that sometimes steps gets in the way. Ego is easier to understand as a function rather than a concept. The function of ego is to protect the illusion. What's the illusion? That image by which we love ourselves conditionally, that image of self that we're constantly trying to live up to. That's just an illusion. And ego's job is to protect it. For example, like any alcoholic or drug addict that goes to the meetings and you say, "My name is so and so, I'm an alcoholic." "Hello, my name is Miguel Ruiz Jr., and I do take things personal. I do make assumptions. Sometimes I'm not impacted with the word. Sometimes I'm not skeptical I hook, line, and sinker. And sometimes I don't do my best. Just ask my wife; she's my witness. And I'm Miguel Ruiz, have PTSD, and don't allow the image of Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. To get in the way of giving myself the permission to heal." So how do we not, going back to your question, how do we not bring assumptions into our everyday life, where when you're on duty, you have the discipline of knowing that an assumption is just a projection, an instrument that will keep you alive. And the discipline is knowing that it's there, but not taking action until it's confirmed there is a potential danger. You have to be aware, but don't have your finger on the trigger. Just simply just be aware and have that stance, but give that space. It's just whatever it is that training is. If you bring it home, understand that there are other things that an assumption can bring in, and we can't usually do it because it's full of emotional wounds, and we can't see it until it gets triggered. PTSD, unlike irrational fear is the mind projecting onto the world, where fear, the function of fear is to protect you, to keep you safe in a moment of danger. That's real fear. Irrational fear is, like my wife says, anxiety is answering all the what ifs with the worst case scenario and constantly believing it. It's this, you're not in any real danger, but the mind can't tell, so it continues to project images. All right. PTSD is not irrational fear. PTSD, you might be doing some work, but a sound can trigger it, a scent can trigger it, a voice can trigger it, a grunt in this case triggered it. And the body can't tell and responds. The body remembers. Basically, it's a nervous system that hasn't been healed. An assumption in this case is irrational fear constantly triggering us to react, but we're not in any real danger. PTSD is acknowledging that our body is trying to protect itself, and we're going to do the work that allows us to heal. To know the difference, that PTSD and irrational fear are not the same, they're separate. One is a projection. One is the nervous system getting triggered because a wound got triggered. So to make assumptions, going back to it, don't believe your assumptions. It's just a story that you're projecting. Is it the truth? Give it your scrutiny that you know how to give. If it survives your scrutiny, then you keep saying yes. But if it doesn't survive, then give your permission to let go.
Well, there's so much there, Miguel, that is just it's so valuable, especially for first responders, because we do carry a lot of things with us, and it does develop into PTS. And then once we start to see it surface, we look at it as weakness. I shouldn't be feeling this way because nobody else feels this way. None of my coworkers feel this way. They've all been through the same stuff that I've been through, but yet why am I dealing with it? Right. And I think that's what we carry. The key, I think, in what you touched on is to leave it, right? Let it go. Acknowledge it is number one. We I think that is the key, is the self-awareness and failing to acknowledge that we're dealing with it. Because if you don't acknowledge the issue, how can you fix it, right? How can you go beyond it, right? So, yeah, there's so much there, and yeah, in law enforcement, the assumptions we make assumptions, but we also we'll never make an arrest based on an assumption. We'll never go to court based on an assumption. We'll assume maybe initially, but we need to back it up with evidence, right? And that's what we're gonna do. And I'll share a quick story with you. And I don't want to get too graphic because I know this isn't your world, but this is why we don't make assumptions. I was attending an autopsy when I was a homicide detective, and I got to my window. You would stand in front of this big, huge picture window, and the medical examiners would do an autopsy. Well, I got there early, so they weren't there yet. Whenever I would wait, I'd go and I'd watch other autopsies happening. And right next door, there was a detective standing there, and they were working on his decedent, his victim. And at every autopsy, they have a full size X-ray of the decedent's body, right? So you can see if there's broken bones, foreign objects, or anything. And every bone in this victim's body was broken, right? The skull was fractured 5 different places. And I looked at so the assumption I made was, and I asked the detective, I said, "Oh, was this a really bad car accident?" Because that's the only type of trauma you'll see in a bad car accident. He said, "No, what we think is this guy is a transient. He was sleeping in a dumpster, behind a shopping center to keep warm because it's wintertime. It does get cold in Arizona in the winter. And this morning, a garbage truck came, picked up, emptied the dumpster in the truck, and compacted everything. Well, there's many angles in the back of a truck in case a fire breaks out or anything. Well, in this case, he saw an arm sticking out, and so he called the police. Now I'm watching the autopsy with the detective, and the medical examiner removed the decedent's brain and starts cutting through the brain because that's what you do in the autopsy. You look at everything, right? Because we can never make assumptions. And then all of a sudden, this metal object fell out of the brain. Boom, boom, right? And I will tell you that you can't hear anything because you're behind a sealed glass window and you can't hear a thing. But that was the loudest sound that I never did hear when I saw that object bounce off of that stainless steel table, because I knew exactly what it was. And the medical examiner picked it up and showed the detective at the window. He's showing it like this. And I'm like, uh-oh. Detective is like, he dropped a few F-bombs. He goes, F, he gets on his phone right away, calls his team up, says, lock down that location. This is a homicide. This is not a accidental death. So I went from homicide transient to body dump, and this is a homicide, right? This is why we don't make assumptions, because we have to figure out, because if the assumption was this is a transient and we're not going to do an autopsy, then there's no justice for this victim, right? But because certain things are in place, we have to do an investigation. Now we're getting to the root of the issue here, right? So yes, we make those assumptions, but never go with that initial assumption. You got to back it up with evidence. So like in this case, it was backed up by the autopsy, which is why we do that. And I apologize if I got a little too graphic for you,
No, no,
but
it's perfectly explained.
but I mean that's the reason. And But again, in law enforcement, we do carry a lot of this stuff, right? And especially when we become parents. And that's what happened to me when I was a homicide detective. I became a dad. Moment that happened for me, the whole landscape changed. Now, investigating death of any kids, especially babies, really affected me because now I'm a dad. Before I could deal with it, yes, it's sad, but I could power through it. I could get through it. Once I became a dad, it changed everything, right? And the first baby case that I had, I came home and I sat in my son, because he was, a couple months old, and I sat in my son's room all night, and I wouldn't leave his side because I was afraid it might happen to him, right? SIDS happened, right? And again, how many times, how many first responders are bringing that home with them and keeping it for years, right? And I think it's your brother, Jose, he talks about in his book, about the rattlesnake and how the snake sheds its skin, right? And it's the old represents the old. And if he doesn't shed it, he's going to be carrying, piles upon piles, pounds of old skin that's not going to help him, right? You've got to release it. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. So that's kind of what's going on in my brain as you were talking. So sorry about that. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's perfect. Thank you. That's totally awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Tami, you want to rescue me here?
No, you're great. I mean, I'm laughing because I hadn't heard that story. I've heard so many, and that's just, that's par for course for being in the first responder field, the stories that we hear. And so for the audience too, like secondhand trauma is real. So you also need to take care of yourself. I love that you said, give yourself permission to heal. And that might be the title of this episode. I don't know. But I think law enforcement specifically needs to hear that. Right now, wellness in law enforcement is kind of a new concept. It's been talked about for a lot of years. The last 5 years, there's been a huge push for it. But there's a lot of disconnect still. We're getting there slowly but surely. And I think a lot of that is the people that have addressed their wounds, their PTS, all of that, and have gone through the healing journey. They're speaking on it. They're doing podcasts, or they're trying to share. The problem is those that have not come to that awareness, that the awareness we talk about self-awareness all the time. They don't even have the self-awareness yet, but they have not come to that realization that it's okay to heal. And it seems scary and painful to get into healing. And I think that's where misconceptions come around what is healing. And I teach about re-breaking a bone. If you have a bone that broke at some point and it didn't set properly, and for anybody that's listening, if you come to the video, watch my little example here. But you have your bone that, it heals wrong, and you go through that whole life trying to, hobble along with it. If you really want to heal, the first thing is going to be painful because you have to re-break that bone and set it properly. And it hurts. And so I think when it comes to healing, you think that you have to go back into the trauma, you have to go back into the story, and cops specifically don't want to go back into the story. The problem is they are already in the story. They are reliving and retelling, and they are not sleeping, they're not in it. So there's healing. That's one of the reasons that Chris and I have stepped into this space, is to do exactly what we're doing. So this is a little full circle moment for me, and that's why I got a little emotional. But we are helping people learn how to heal. And that also, for the audience, healing is possible. It's very possible. And once you do heal, life gets amazing. And I think also one little thing too, with society, social media and the news and the narratives and everything being so negative against police. Don't make assumptions. For everyone, you never know what somebody else is going through. You need to, look at the bigger picture, what's going on, and everything that you've said and what you guys teach and have your books, it correlates to everybody. Everybody's missing the mark because they just misunderstand and make assumptions about each other. So we can find healing as a whole, as society, as the individual. There's so much, and we only got into the 4 agreements. There's the 5th agreement. There are your books.
And then this book.
Well,
Well, so
Great.
the poison arrow, that's your newest one, right?
yeah, that's brilliant.
Yes.
And I talked briefly about it. And that, but I do want to say, because kind of like what Chris did before, like something was said, like it just sparked my mind. The thing about and healing is there's also beliefs, like taboos, that block our healing. There's like you're soft, you're weak, whatever judgments one grows up to acknowledge. Oh, even the word woo woo. It's like it's
Yeah.
that sometimes there are words that says, oh, these are the things that kind of stop you. But if you give them some scrutiny and be willing to like, all right, is it really that I'm soft if I acknowledge that I have PTSD or I have a wound? Is or whatever judgment? Because that's the thing in our domestication, there's things that we are believe that we're not we can't be like we're not supposed to cry, we're not supposed to be weak, we're not supposed to be soft, we're not supposed to be all those things because people will take advantage of whatever. It's kind of like the story of now that you're a parent, it's you're aware of it, you know. It's these things that allows you, that stops you actually, that stops you from healing a root belief. Like I know there's people, for example, with autism, I know people who won't want to acknowledge their child has autism because if you have a mental health issue in your family, then your family is tainted and you're marred blood and whatever societal judgments you've grown up believing still impacts you. So acknowledging any mental health issue is something so taboo that you'll bring shame to the family if you ever acknowledge it. Things like that, you translate it to other things, and you can find a lot of things that stop you from healing, you know, and relationships with people. For example, you know, growing up as a minority in National City in Chula Vista, you know, one of the scares in regards to police officer and relationship was fits the description. You hear the word fits the description, and we're like, I hope I don't fit the description because that could happen. That go in quickly. Now, I say that as personal because that's something I did grow up worried about. There's some clothes you never wore because you don't want to fit the description. Because if you fit the description, it might be trouble because you can't tell. You know, for example, in San Diego, wearing radar gear, you're fitting the description. You know, and it's one of those assumptions and your own traumas and worries and anxieties that get in the way of relating to other people and listening to other people. When we have that and recognize that within each other, we're able to heal that and allows us to actually open a bridge of understanding with one another. Why, you know, when you were talking about the social media and things in regards to police officers, most of the time we're talking about trauma versus trauma or wounds were wounds and whatever other stuff is happening. But and that's the individual level, we are talking about wounds that doesn't allow us to listen to one another because in that ability the healing lies. You know, there's of course the people who mistrust on both sides. There are people who trust on both sides. There are people who are great officers and great civilians, and there's civilians and officers who are not so great. Both exist. What are you going to do with that duality? Well, you're the constant in every relationship you are in. How can I heal the wounds that surrounds me? By healing the wounds that is in me. To healing the wounds that in myself stops me from even listening to anyone else. Because I give myself the ability to heal and let go of beliefs that no longer serve me, then I'm listening to another human being and recognizing each other's humanity. Like that story that Chris was telling about, Officer Chris Zamora. You hear it from the human's lens, and I can totally relate. You know, as a father, I can totally relate. As a father, I could also be afraid of fits the description. My son has autism. Sometimes he wears it and he wears a hoodie.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those things that a projection can come from an unhealed wound that will get in the way of any relationship, let alone the ability to listen to one another. We listen to the story and we can feel that humanity. We can feel that compassion and we can feel that fear and understand where their fear is coming from. And when we're able to understand where that fear is coming from, Well, we can relate. And when we relate, you can see that humanity, that's where we're at. And that's how you start bringing down walls. But it only happens as an individual.
And I think on the individual level, really quick, for the audience listening, if you're not sure, well, I need to heal, or how do I know if I need to heal, or whatever, the quickest and easiest, simplest way of knowing that you have an unhealed wound is if you're reactive. If you
Yep.
are emotionally reactive to something,
Yep.
you are unhealed. Whether
Yep.
it's social media, what somebody else says, somebody says something about our president, and you have a reaction, unhealed wound. And it may not be the conscious wound that you think it is.
I like just to be quick. Imagine your emotional body, your emotions are like a car alarm in a car. When someone touches it, it goes beep 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 beep. All right. An emotional reaction is just like a car alarm. Someone touched a wound, a belief system, or an actual wound, and you're reacting. Instead of judging yourself for having the reaction, where did that reaction come from? Just asking that question alone allows you to go and follow the trail of where did that come from. And oftentimes, if you go deep, you can even begin to heal wounds that you didn't even realize you had because it's been there such a long time that you feel it's natural and it's it's part of your life. But you unweave that thing, and that image that you have of yourself falls apart because you realize you never really were that person. It was just a persona you created to protect that wound.
Yeah, and you bring up such a great point about listening, right? And we have to listen. And I, I'm a storyteller, so I'm going to tell another story, really quick,
Yeah.
because it falls in line with what you're talking about. I was working patrol. I got dispatched to a call of a disorderly guy at a store. He was inside the store yelling at the clerk. They called the police, right? So I show up. I'm the first officer on scene, and the guy is standing out in the parking lot. And you could tell he's agitated. And I get out of my car and I can't understand what he's saying because he's so agitated. And I said, "Sir, what's your name?" And he yells at me. He goes, "Why?" And I go, "Sir, what's your name?" "Why?" And he's getting amped up. And I'm like, "Sir, because I'm the police and I'm asking questions." Now I'm escalating, right? And I'm calling for backup on the radio. So when I clear on the radio, all of my backup officers can hear this guy yelling in the background, "Why?" Right? And I'm beginning to yell and give commands to this guy. And now every officer working is coming because they know I'm going to get into a fight. Sounds like it. And my buddy shows up. And again, "Sir, you need to give me your name. I'm the police. What is your name?" "Why?" And then my buddy steps in. He goes, "Okay, why? What's your last name?" Right? He was telling me his name the whole time. I just wasn't hearing it. Right? And when the moment he did that, because the guy was Cambodian. I didn't put any of this together. What I looked at was he's not doing what I am saying, right? And the moment my buddy said, "Okay, why? What's your last name?" I felt this big. Like I shrank this big, like, oh my God. Like I just, escalated just and so we ended up talking to the guy, calming him down. He spoke no English, right? Turns out he was missing. He was on he w they reported him missing for 5 months in West Phoenix, which is pretty far from where my jurisdiction is. And for 5 months, he's been living on the streets, and he looks like a transient, right? He's autistic. He's, everything that you're talking about. And so once we calmed him down, I drove him back to the station. I contacted his family to come pick him up. And it was right around lunchtime. So I went and picked up some lunch for him and for me because I hadn't eaten yet. And I gave him some food and he was so happy. And then he was telling me to eat with him. Like he wouldn't let me leave. He wanted me to sit down and to eat with him. And so I sat there and I ate with this man. And he was just so happy and he was so grateful. And I thought to myself, "Oh my God, I almost escalated this to a point where there's no return." And I hate to say that because I had this fear that he was going to attack me. Why? Because I've had friends who were killed in the line of duty. I've had friends who were beat up, in law enforcement, get into fights. I have been in fist fights with people, right? But it took somebody stepping in and hearing, listening to what is being said. And so what I say to all first responders listening, never lose your compassion. We entered this profession because we want to help people. And if you lose your compassion, that's your self-awareness right there, that you need to start thinking about this, right? And this is why we do what we do. And Miguel, I'm so grateful that you were here talking about the books that you've written and that your family have written, because they do apply to first responders. And I love every one of the books.
Thank you.
So
Yeah, Chris,
sorry.
thank you so much. I'll be honest with you, man. I'm legit because you just hit one of my biggest fears, especially as a father of an autistic young man. He's 20 years old. Man, yeah, you just hit the nail. Like it just bullseyed it. It's one of those biggest fears. Like, what's gonna happen to my boy if I'm not around to be that? Like your partner said, is like to de-escalate, because when someone looks at an autistic young man or young woman, they can't tell. The first expectation, oh, this guy's on drugs, she's on
Mhm.
something, whatever, and the autism, because you can't really see it. So as a fear, but thank you so much for saying that, because it's one of those things that it's where you hope that the discipline of the person engaging, in this case, my child, in like the story of the young man, why is pivotal, because the fear we have, it can blind us.
Mhm.
But when you recognize, hey, there's another human on the other side, and that compassion is exactly what we need to like, oh, yeah, okay, that's good. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I
Well,
appreciate that. Thank
we
you.
have the same mission, and that's to help people.
Yeah.
And that's so we're in alignment for sure. And I appreciate you uh, for sharing that.
Oh, I appreciate you too. Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Ah, I'm almost well, and I'll talk to you when we're off camera as well, because we are going to be doing another episode specifically on autism. Our chief of staff has an autistic son. We are friends with a company that also is teaching about autism awareness specifically for law enforcement to understand some of the signs to look for. And then we have a few other law enforcement that also have autistic kids. So we are going to be doing another episode specifically on that. Uh, so you are welcome to join that conversation. We can talk more about that.
Sure, sure. That'd be great. Yes.
I mean, you are welcome to come back anytime. Hello.
Thanks.
Well, yeah,
Appreciate it.
I said talk about this.
Thank you.
I do want to honor your time. This has been such an amazing experience and conversation. For our audience listening, re-listen, share it with everybody. There's so much wisdom and insight from all of this. Read the books. Again, healing is possible. And if you don't know, I know that that is a new concept within law enforcement. It is. And it's being understood in different ways, and it's okay to step outside of the law enforcement realm as well and seek out these different practitioners. One of the things that we teach and preach is, okay, you have a therapist, great. Have an entire arsenal, a spider web of different modalities, try different things. Not everything is for everyone. Like, you could read one of these books, totally resonate with it. You could read the other one and be like, it's not. Everybody's got a different thing. And one of the things that I do personally when it comes to reading books, especially because I read all personal self-development books. I have books on every facet of my house around here. And I don't read them cover to cover. I never sit down and read a book cover to cover when it's personal development, self-help. I read it until I need to be done, and I set it down, and I trust that when I come to pick up that book again, it's going to lead me exactly where I'm at in that moment. And had I just sat down with the goal to read it from cover to cover, I'd miss the point. I'd miss the lessons. So for those, if you have a book that's sitting around, just pick it up, read a couple pages, absorb it, actually implement it. One of the things that I always do with our podcast at the very end is if somebody were to just tune in to the last 2 seconds of this, which with this episode, I don't think that's the case, but if they were to just listen to the last little part, what is your 2-second mic drop piece of advice that you would have for the audience? What is that takeaway for them?
A moment of clarity without any action is just a thought that passes in the wind. But a moment of clarity followed by action becomes a pivotal moment in our life.
That was the most poetic one we've had yet. That was amazing.
Yeah. Wow.
Where's that? Did you guys write that? Where did that come from?
And it's in my master. It's in the mastery of self.
Oh, I've read that one. I should know that.
It's the intro to it.
You even signed that one for me. Thank you very much.
Actually, ironically, I remember the very first time I said that. As I was at Celebrate Your Life, actually.
I've never heard you say it. Okay.
It was back in 2014 or 15. Uh, it was at the very end. They had all the speakers on the podium. My dad was there, and I was there, and everyone was supposed to say something, and everyone's saying, they're great authors. They're sharing, and I'm like, okay, what do I have? And right on the spot, like when it was my turn, that's what came out. You're basically, because I was thinking of, someone who, like, I was thinking of a drug addict or alcoholic that has a moment of clarity, that when they wake up sober, but they wake up after a bender, and they have that nasty hangover, a nasty, nasty hangover. And in that moment, they wake up and they realize, all right, I have this. Like, what have I done? It's like that moment of clearing where, like, the fog lifted and I can see what I've done. But you have a nasty hangover that, if you drink a shot of tequila or beer, the pain will go away. If you do reach in for the shot of tequila or beer, well, you punted the problem for another day. But if in that moment you decide, you know what, I don't want this anymore. I don't want to experience this. I don't want to feel like this. And you decide to take the steps to sober up, or in this case, the very toughest one is detox. It's painful. That's when your life changes. It became a pivotal moment. So when I had that image in my head, that line came out.
It's so good.
Perfectly said, and yeah.
Well,
We're taking this all in because it's so much. I, it's just so much good information that applies to everybody, and yeah, I'm just at all right now. I'm you know what, Miguel, I'm visualizing what is it like in your household during holidays where your dad and your brother come in and all of you guys are together. Like, how much positive energy is there? Like, to me, that's like, wow, that would be. I'd like to be a fly on that wall when you guys.
It's a lot of fun. We just avoid playing Risk. Don't bring Risk out, and we're all good.
that's amazing.
That's awesome.
No, it's awesome. I'm so thankful. We truly do. We are a reflection of you guys. One of the very first books that I read when I was 18 after my dad had passed away, I got introduced to Wayne Dyer and Manifest Your Destiny. And that put me on this trajectory of learning healing and all of these things. I don't know when I found the Four Agreements, but I know I found it a long time ago. And we teach, and I reference you guys in both my master's thesis, my doctoral dissertation. We share about you guys. The law enforcement space, for everybody listening, please do yourself a favor. If you have not already been introduced to this family and their amazing books, please do so. That's my last thing. Chris, did you want to have, I mean, we can't beat the poetic, but you have.
No, I'm not. Listen, after that why incident with me, somebody actually referred the Four Agreements to me to read, right? Because of that. So I'm just letting everybody know your books do apply to first responders. So by all means, reach out, get those books, read them, and you're not going to regret any of it. It's all good reading. So that's it for me.
Yeah. I will also list, I mean, I have so many sitting here. We didn't even touch, so good.
I know.
We're gonna have to do a follow-up podcast.
Yes, please. Anytime.
Yes.
Looking forward to
We'll
it.
talk more. For the audience tuning in, thank you guys so much for being here. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and, drop comments, ask questions. And if you want, okay, one last thing before I wrap this up. I want to thank you, and commend you, because I've met a lot of people in the wellness space, a lot of gurus and teachers and celebrities, and most of them are really cool. Like, they're very good. I got to be your room lead at Celebrate Your Life, which for those that are listening, the room lead, I ran sound. I made sure that, the mic runners were there, that the book signing, like all the things went according to plan. And you were so approachable and humble. It was my job to get you mic'd up, and somebody had come up to you, and you ended up serenading everybody with a rendition of Happy Birthday, I think is what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you started singing, and we're like, okay, amazing. And then you did your thing on stage, and then afterward for the book signing, this is where you really stood out for me, because you know how people are like, don't meet your mentors, don't meet your,
Mhm.
that's not the case with you. What
Okay.
stood out for me with you with the book signings? I've been at a lot of book signings with people, and they have their fake smile. They're like, just like, how many more of these do I have to do? Oh, thank you. You love me. That's great. Thanks. Let me sign and move to the next and like get the line going.
Mhm.
You didn't do that. And as the room lead, it was my responsibility to get that line going. But you have this ability to just be present with everybody, to shut out all the noise. You listened to them, you made eye contact, you genuinely smiled, you posed for pictures. And for that, 10, 15, 30 seconds that person got you, they got you. And I just took a step back and was like, freaking incredible. So
Thank you.
thank you for doing what you
Thank you.
do. And on that note, again, thank you for being here. And until next week.
I'll be there.